We are in Teres Menachem Sefer HaMamorim Tovshin Aleph Tovshin days in the Maimer of Shabbos Parshas Pinchas Mevorchim Chodesh Menachem of Tovshin Aleph, and we are on page Kuf Yutes, the second to the last line, third to the last line of the bottom to the bottom. The line starts with the word midos. We're up to the full stop. Umizeh. The Rebbe is discussing here in the Maimer the idea of karbanos, sacrificial offerings, and their centrality in Avodas Hashem, in our Avodas Hashem. And he's explaining why we are aspiring, why is it so central, and why, in fact, indeed, which is expressed in the fact that we are aspiring for the third Beis Hamikdash to be rebuilt, when we will be able to bring karbanos again. Why is that more central and more important than, for example, davening, which is in place of karbanos, where the spiritual aspects and dimension of davening actually plays itself out, of karbanos actually plays itself out in a far more in a far stronger way, because indeed all those things all the elements that karbanos have, that davening has, which is in place of karbanos, actually needed to be there when the person brought a karban also. And in fact, that seemed to be the main aspect of bringing the karban, the inner workings, the narrative behind the karban, the reflection of those aspects that are playing itself out in the physical bringing of the karban, as they refer to man and the internal workings of man in his Avodas Hashem. So why such a big emphasis on the physical karban? So the Rebbe began to explain that Kodesh Baruch Hu desired to have a dwelling place for himself down in this world, for his very essence down in this world, as opposed to the revelations of God that take place in the upper realms, and the reason and the dwelling place is brought about through Avodah. The Shomer man was put into Gan Eden, La'avda, to work it, and the Shomer to guard it. That means a reference to Avodah Hashem, serving God in a way of Avodah and Shmira, which is a mitzvah saseh, mitzvah laiseseh. And the Rebbe went on to say that when God created the world, He left something undone. That in the world you have two components, or two aspects to creation. One is creation as it is in a created state, and then there is the la'asos, l'sakein, that part of creation that man has to fill in. And that is true not only in this world, but also in Gan Eden, because there are parallel worlds. What a person does down here affects the Gan Eden, and therefore there is in Gan Eden as well, Gan Eden as it is, in its state as it is created, and then there is that which is added into Gan Eden through man's Avodas Hashem. And then we began to explain that Gan Eden is inherently higher, essentially higher and different than our physical world, because our physical world is connected to midos, the emotional attributes, spheres of godliness, because we know God created the world with midos, right? The creation takes place of this physical world through the midos, through the emotional attributes of godliness, whereas Gan Eden is related to Meichin, to the intellectual attributes of the spheres, right? The 10 spheres. And Meichin and midos, intellect and emotion, are inherently separate. That is why, in order for the midos to come into being, there needs to be the retraction and concealment of the Meichin, of the intellectual faculties, for the midos to come into being. Although they come from Meichin, but the way they come from Meichin is that Meichin, the intellect, has to be retracted and concealed, and then, as the Rebbe says, we get something which is not Meichin, neither Meichin nor midos.
Why do you think Meichin has to be withdrawn from midos? I know it's said often, but it never makes sense to me why it has to be withdrawn. This is like the calf being withdrawn. from creation.
Correct. Like the Ein Sof being withdrawn, and only then it could come to being. Moichin, intellect, if it is there, illuminating and shining and present in its fullness, will not allow, will hinder the emotional. That's a physical phenomenon. We know that people that are more academic or more brainy, as it were, right? They have stronger intellect, usually are less expressive emotionally, because the intellect is so powerful and so great that it dominates. It dominates. The midas are born from Mechin. They come from Mechin, right? But they can only be born if they're allowed to find expression. Let's go back to the Maimer of the Bar Mitzvah, where the Frierdiker Rebbe discusses quite at length Mechin and Midas. Seichel, intellect. One of the differentiating characteristics between Mechin and Midas is Mechin, intellect, could be engaged in and could be active even if there's nobody else there, even if the person is on his own. Midas come into play only when there is somebody else. Avram Avinu sat at his tent waiting for guests. Why? He was looking for somebody to do chesed with. You can't do chesed when there's nobody else there. There's the necessity for another individual to be there for the chesed to be manifest, to be able to engage in chesed. Intellect, you could sit a whole day on your own, withdrawn, and as it says in the Maimer, trachten askolis, you can engage in intellectual pursuits. You don't need anybody else there. In fact, in many cases, having people around you or being involved with others hinders this idea of contemplation, and the person wants to contemplate. He's bodiless. You go into a state of seclusion where you can actually connect with the ideas, right? So we see clearly that Mechin and Midas are not only different, but they're even opposites. So Midas are the result of Mechin, but they can only come, and they're born by Mechin, which are called the father and mother, right? As we learn in Tanya, Chochmah and Bina is called Abba ve'Ima, as mentioned also in yesterday's Shiur. Bina is Ema Ilah Mekana Bepersaya, the upper mother, so to speak. The lower mother, by the way, is Malchus Datzilis. The upper mother is Bina Datzilis. So Bina of Atzilis dwells in Elam Abriya, and she's called Ema, the mother, because the father is Chochmah. So Chochmah and Bina give birth to what? To the Midas, as the Alter Rebbe says in chapter 3 of Tanya, right? But they are different. So different, in fact, that the Midas can only come into being once the Mechin is retracted and concealed, so that it allows for the characteristics of Midas to come into play. Because the presence of Mechin, the presence of the intellect, hinders, because they're so different, it hinders the Midas from being revealed. They come from Mechin, and you will have in Mechin what's called Midas Sheba Mechin, strands of, when for example, if an intellect is drawing you towards being kind or being lenient, that's the chesed in the Mechin. Or if to be strict and otherwise, that's the Gevura Sheba Mechin. But it's still within the realm of Mechin. It's not an emotion. It's not an emotion. Those are the if you will, the potential or the sources of the midas that are to follow, but that can only come. Those midas can only come into being once the coldness of the intellect is retracted and removed, and allows for the warmth and the heat of the emotion, the passion, to come into presence.
The animal side of midas operates just as strongly if intellect is strong.
No. When we talk about,
you see,
just a second, just like there is midas sheba mechin that I just mentioned, there's also mechin sheba midas. Okay? We have to differentiate between intellect, which is there for the purpose of implementing the instinct. It doesn't mean that when a person has passion If a person is doing chesed, he'll do it irrationally or unintelligently. But it's the meichin aspect as it is related to the midas. So it's the midas, for example, right? Take an animal. You're talking about the animal side. Let's take an animal. When we say an animal has no seichel, what do you mean it has no seichel? Some of the animals are very clever. We can see how clever they are. You just have to watch a few of David Attenborough's life programs and see how brilliant they are, in fact. Right? Their survival instincts and so on and so forth. But those are meichin. That's not the meichin that we're talking about. That's not pure meichin. That is the intellectual aspect within the world of midas. So the dominant force over here is what's here. What's present is the midas, the emotions. Being that it has the animal is or the creature is one that has intellectual capacity. It is able to harness certain elements of the seichel. In other words, the parts of the seichel which tell the person this is the way to achieve what I want, and this is the way not to achieve what I want. To harness those for the purpose of what? Carrying out its intended.
Wouldn't you rather say that at the point where you're doing something that the animal soul commands from the emotions, you actually are unaware, because otherwise it would be an easy decision to make. In fact, the emotions have disappeared, because at that point in time, you're contemplating doing something with tremendously clear rationale without being aware. It becomes difficult to make the decision.
1 second, but that's exactly
different.
The question is, Harris, you're touching on it, but the point is
that's the point he's asking.
Okay, the point is this:
and they are separate.
But what's driving you? The question is what's driving you?
They do disappear. The point you're making a contemplation with your animal soul intellectually. You aren't aware of the emotional input. Otherwise, if you were, it wouldn't be much of a contest.
Okay, but you're talking about something else. I'm talking about what is the driver? Why am I doing what I'm doing at the moment? You ever heard the expression, what was I thinking? So what does it mean when I was doing that? I didn't have seichel, I didn't have the intellectual capacity to know how to do what I was doing when I wasn't thinking. I wasn't thinking, and at the same time, I was clever enough to figure out how to carry out that which I shouldn't have done.
The opposite of that is the brilliant criminal who uses his mind, brilliant mind, for criminal
Nazi or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So in other words, what's the driver? What is present here? Where are you guys going?
7 o'clock.
Oh, right. This is Rosh Chodesh. So what's driving you here? What's driving you is the emotion and those aspects of the intelligence that can allow the person to determine how to carry that. That's not meichin that we're talking about. The meichin that we're talking about, when meichin is there, midas cannot be there, is why am I doing what I'm doing? There are certain things that are driven by emotions. I'm doing it because I feel like I need to do it. And then there are certain things, like Alter Rebbe says, Mayach shalet al alev. No. The mind is actually the one that is the deciding force whether I should be doing what I'm doing at all. That's real meichin. That's real intellect. That's the essence of intellect. The aspects of the intellect that allow me to be clever enough to know what to do or how to do. That's not the full-blown meichin. That's more instinct. That's more. It's the chetzenis meichin. It's the external dimension of the intellect. The internal dimension of the intellect is actually a force that could allow the person to be decisive and to do what they need to do.